I'm very conscious in this conversation of how clueless I am about all this stuff. So I'm like, whenever I say something, I'm like, oh my God, am I saying the wrong thing? Probably, but there you go.
I mean, you're on a podcast
know.
journey. You're about to learn so many things from so many places. You can't be faulted for trying to learn.
Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. We get curious about all things gender, sex, and sexuality, as well as relationships, feminism, the inclusive kind, mental health and kink, and all that makes us humans unique and diverse. From body positivity to body dysmorphia, it's all welcome here. Come with us on a journey of inclusion, acceptance, and respect. I'm your host, Esther Lemons. I identify as a cisgender woman, and my pronouns are she and her. In this episode, I have a conversation with Devi Irony, who's a dominant and sex worker, as well as an activist and educator in the kink and BDSM scene. Devi's pronouns are they, them, and they are a non-binary person. Find out what that means to Devi in this episode. We also talk about the freedom that can come from embracing a label, how certain body parts are not necessarily gender markers, societal conditioning and standards and playing with gender presentation, how gender fits into BDSM and kink, what sex work can include, kink trends in times of a pandemic, and the importance of touch and human contact. To clarify some terminology that is used in the episode, AFAB is assigned female at birth. It was recorded on the 9th of March 2021. Now let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome. What's your name?
My name is Devi Irony.
Hello, and how do you identify, Devi?
I am a non-binary person.
Right, and what does that mean to you?
Well, the easiest way to say is that I am not a woman, which I'm born AFAB, but I am also not a man. And I am both a little bit gender fluid in sort of my presentation, but I really identify with non-binary, which means that I identify as neither.
Yeah, and is that something recent for you, or is that something that you felt for a while?
Well, that's the trick question, right?
Exactly.
As with everything you experience in life, when you finally come to the realization, a lot of sort of aha and oh, that's what that meant moments occur. But I will say that I really, really started sort of my realization that I was on a gender sort of journey when I think it would have been sort of really started like privately in my brain January, February 2018, when I was like really starting to educate myself a lot about actual, different gender identities.
Yeah.
Within just sort of the scope of this new group of sort of humans, adult humans that were coming into my life, and seeing the freedom with which people were really being celebrated in their gender expression. And when you see something you like, you tend to really, well, I do anyways, dive in. And I started researching that feeling of like, oh, I don't fit into that. Growing up, I had a lot of dysphoria that I, as I became an adult, realized what that was, but I was uncomfortable with a lot of things while growing up. I'm 33 now, if anyone is interested. So my personal journey has been fairly late in life, not as late as others, but I'm from a rural town in Ontario, Canada. And now I'm in a metropolitan city in Quebec, French Canada. But growing up, it was very much like, there are men and there are women. And it always made me feel uncomfortable to be like, when people would call me Miss, when little Miss. And I wasn't necessarily, let's say, a tomboy, as a lot of people call it, and am still very femme in my presentation. But just those sort of titles made me very uncomfortable. And I was given a name that I also didn't identify with. I was given the nickname of my grandmother's name, and it was very femme. And I didn't like it. Like it, when you would sit down and be like, "Come on, Esther, I can do this," right?
Yeah.
I would sit down and go, "Come on, me, you can do it," because I was so uncomfortable with my name, and it just never fit. And it wasn't until I've lived a crazy life. I didn't know what I thought my first name was the name I was being called. It turns out it was my middle name, and I didn't know I had a first name until I was going into high school, at which time it was a much more gender neutral name. For listeners to understand, I am on this podcast going by my podcast name, so Devi Irony. It's also my kink name, and I like to just keep a little bit of separation between my vanilla Facebook and the rest of the world.
That's fair.
Yes. But finding this sort of gender neutral first name, which was like a fucking candy being given, like a lot of people who have changed their names or just because of comfort or necessity will know how much of it a bitch it is to change your name. So to just be like, oh no, I don't have to change any forms, I just have to learn a new signature, I am very, very lucky in that, and I do recognize that. So I went by my first name, and looking back now, I'm like, oh, well, okay, that was sort of the start of my journey, in really like sort of first steps that I can look back at, and be like, oh, okay, well, you had a lot of dysphoria with your name, and I don't know. It's definitely one of those moments where looking back, you're like, oh,
yeah,
little baby queer, okay.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting. Like you say, stuff just felt uncomfortable when you were growing up. So the name was one thing.
Yes.
How did you feel in your body?
Oh, I have a very interesting mood with my body. I am built very, I don't know how to explain this, stereotypically very femme, like cartoonishly so. I'm 5'3". I have really long legs, no waist, literally, and just giant boobs. Like I'm talking like huge. They're ridiculous. And while I do enjoy them very much, I am only now at this time considering getting, a reduction, and it's mostly for physical comfort rather than I don't find them sort of dysphoric for me, because I have the option to real strap them down if I need to. Because for me, they are not like a gender marker for me.
Right.
And I don't know if that's a like a non-binary ing. Maybe it is. Some non-binary people choose to remove breast tissue, and if that is what makes them most comfortable in their body, absolutely. But for me, I like my big boobs, and I like to put them in my boyfriend's face. So, so yeah, any sort of body dysmorphia really stems from very much just like your standard like beauty ideals, like gotta be skinny. Everybody's got to be skinny, and also a little bit on the fact that like a lot of non-binary imagery initially, or androgynous, tends to lean towards like a masculine, traditionally masculine silhouette. So to be androgynous in fashion, and as somebody who loves fashion, to be androgynous in fashion, you don't have a chest, and you are skinny, and you wear drapey apocalypse clothes or a nice suit. And so like at times, of course, the weight monster jumps on and is like, hey, you don't look like that, that's a problem. But I do my very best to tell that gremlin to shut the fuck up, and then I put something loud and colorful and flamboyant on, and make myself feel good and like myself. But I mean, it is a lot of like coach, self coaching, I guess, being like, this is not an actual thought that you're having. This is like your mental health deciding to take a bad turn today, and you're fine. Like, I am actively, taking care of my body. I'm exercising to stay healthy and feel good in myself, but nothing extreme,
Yeah, it's such a lot of conditioning that we have to put up with, right? And I'm seeing more and more of it for what it is as well. And even if you've been raised quite, I don't know, not even raised quite liberal in a way, but you think you're aware when you grow up and you see things around you and you see it, you get it. And then still, you get to a certain age and you're like, hang on a minute. Shit, that was really, really installed deeply in my psyche, all this stuff about being binary, I suppose, but like, especially women, like what we should look like, what we should be like and dress like and act like and all that bullshit. And it's just, it's infuriating, really, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And while I do not necessarily feel a part of all of that, I did have to live through all of that. I experienced everything. I do have to say that, like, once I really sort of embraced the non-binary, I felt a weight a little bit off my shoulders, mostly from like the lingerie standpoint, where I was like, I don't fucking have to wear any of that anymore. I don't know why. It was awesome. It was very much like a releasing sort of odd ideals that I didn't realize that,
Yeah. How interesting. So embracing the non-binary identity or label or both, whatever, sort of made some of that, the whole stereotypical expectations of women fall away.
Yes. But it's also very funny and interesting because now when I choose to dress like hyper femme, like going as far as into perhaps like a 1950s dress, because I love dresses. I'm going to wear them. I also love pants, shorts, and no clothing at all.
Yeah.
But I get to put that on and it feels like me expressing part of my gender presentation, but sometimes it is like a costume that I get to put on and go out. Well, not anymore, but go out in public and, just be like high femme for a night. And it's fun to play with gender and gender presentation, I find. Now, talking to my trans boyfriend, he doesn't necessarily want to be like talking about him wearing dresses and things. That's not interesting to him. So for me, I'm going to be like, I'm going to wear a dress or pants or whatever, and he can present however he wants,
Yeah. So, you mentioned being, I don't know if you mentioned being dominant yet, but you did mention the scene, BDSM and fetish and stuff.
Yes.
How did you get into that?
Ooh. Okay. Do you remember the year like 2006?
Vaguely.
Yes. Well, I found the kink scene before I found sex work. I had met a few people in Montreal, which is where I still live, who were just like really cool and had, sort of a goth aesthetic. I think I was just out of university, or no, 2000. It wouldn't have been 2006. It was like 2009. I was just out of university. I have all of my years mixed up. Fuck it. Whatever. It's around that time.
Yeah.
And, I go out to like a goth bar and I see people being kind of cool. And I start doing 2009 Google research, looking at pictures, because ever since I can remember, I've always been attracted to things like corsets and big, ridiculous dresses. And I had found myself exploring in my sexuality with light bondage and, some paddles and some dildos when I was in my early 20s, which just all in all led me to answering a Craigslist ad to learn how to be a dom.
Excellent.
So, I actually started my career in BDSM while learning about BDSM. But since then, I did a number of years of work, like, so taking sessions and seeing clients, but I don't have the patience to be dicked around. So I have since left that, but have not left the lifestyle, and have definitely moved to more of a enjoying it for pleasure than moreover than money, though I do like to be paid for things.
Well, yeah. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. You mentioned sex work as well. So how did you get into that?
Okay, so it really depends what you define sex work as. I use sex work as the whole of sex work. So I currently am a burlesque performing and fetish performer. I have previously been a pro dominatrix as well as a cam girl. And I use cam girl because at the time I was identifying as a girl, sort of, or as much as I ever did. So at the time, for speaking about that, I answered a Craigslist ad, and and so yeah, I went to dom school.
Awesome.
Yeah, I learned with 5 other doms. We were all learning together, and it was very very interesting. So I started taking, after I felt comfortable enough being alone with a stranger for an hour, it was pretty soon. I like to dive into pretty much everything, pretty much head first.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was not very long, considering I started out the scene in sex work, and then from there fell in love with the people and the support system that is made through that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, an interesting thing that you just said was to how do you define sex work? And this, I think everyone has their own assumptions about it, don't they?
Yes.
So, I mean, what is your definition of it? Because you talked a little bit about your part in it and what it means to you.
So I use it as an umbrella term because for me, sex work is everything that has to do with sexuality and sexiness, I guess is the best way to put it. So to me and a lot of my friends, burlesque work is sex work.
Right.
If you're an exotic dancer, you're a sex worker. You are profiting off of sex. And there's nothing wrong with that. If anything, I advocate for it. And I personally think that, if the world was all well and done, people would be licensed and trained and
safe. Yeah.
Safe. Yeah. People would have rights, and that is really important to me. But as it stands, in most cases, rights are something to be fought for, apparently.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so it's anything to do with sex. Does not necessarily mean that you are having sexual relations.
Okay. Yeah, because a lot of people might think, oh, sex work, oh, that's being a prostitute or something.
Yes, and prostitute, I would advise that anyone listening is an outdated term. Sex worker is much better.
Ah, see, yeah, that's what I was going to ask, actually. When I said prostitute, I was wondering if that is still a term that is okay to use. So that's a no.
It's preferably not, because of all the connotations. It has decades of slander, associated with it.
Totally.
When, especially in like North America, we have so many like cop shows is really, really important to, I don't know, culture or whatever, because they love cops, I guess. But you always see like the drug addicted quote prostitute who's either the victim or the perpetrator, and they're always someone who's had something bad done to them because they did something bad, or they're doing something bad. And I think that there's a very big stigma that is sort of centered around that word because of that.
Yeah, well, thank you for educating me.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I shall not use the word again.
In actuality, these are just people working for money, doing a job that, needs to be done in the world and should be protected.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when I say it, I'm not making any judgments about it myself, but I appreciate that there is a lot of stigma around the term for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Must not say prostitute. Must not say prostitution.
Yeah, I know that for some things, like in England, that's like a common word. Like my friends who are in sex work still sometimes use it. So I think that it's just not made its way over there yet.
Right.
The sort of waves
Yeah.
of what's okay and what's not okay comes from like wherever it centers from. Then people in those circles tell the
Yeah.
people, and then that's just sort of how it goes.
Yeah, totally. It will evolve, I'm sure. Yeah. As you already said. It's not just the word, but it's like, all the stigma and the whole history behind it and all sorts of stuff. Yeah,
Yes,
totally. Yeah.
which is stupid because it's like it's such a necessary profession.
It totally is. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
am very much looking forward to the day that things are safe again, for
Mm.
basic human contact, so that, all these
Mm.
people who have been so touch starved can go and be
I know,
touched
right?
and pay for
Yeah.
somebody to do it who's like safe. Like there's people who cuddle for a
Hmm.
job. Like they
Yeah, I've heard of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I find that
Yeah.
like that would definitely fall under sex work because you're using your body. Even
Mm.
though there's nothing necessarily inherently sexual, it's a weird
Mm.
it sort of falls into a gray zone, absolutely.
Hmm.
But I think it's absolutely a necessary thing as well. And I think that as soon as
Hmm.
people as soon as the pandemic is over, everyone should go get a massage because
Yeah.
they've got a year and a whatever, however long we're still stuck inside of like pent up PTSD
Yeah.
stress, and have somebody just also touch them and pay attention to their bodies because everyone is
Mm.
living such like it's like living in a bubble, but like the bubble is like also screens. I don't know how to explain it. It's exactly what we're all living, but like I haven't had human
Mm.
contact in. It's only been a month and a half for me right now because my partner lives
Hmm.
5 hours away, and
Ah.
we're moving in. Yes, so in May we'll be back together, which is great. But like I know people who haven't seen anyone in over a year because they're
Yeah.
immunocompromised. They haven't touched a human being in over a year, and it's like, okay,
I
well,
know.
I'm with just a month, like sad a bit, you know.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
cannot imagine how awful that feels. If
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
were,
No, totally.
you know, if I suddenly had the option to pay somebody to pay all of the attention to me, I absolutely fucking would.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, COVID is unhealthy and stuff, but deprivation of touch is also not
Yes.
healthy. Mm. Yeah. Is there a connection between the scene, the work you do, and enjoying that part of it as well, and your gender? I mean, how does that fit together, like the non binary label?
Ooh. Okay. Well, it's very interesting because in BDSM, it is very gendered. Everything is playing with gender, making fun of gender, or like hyper gendered. So
Mm.
if you look at the classic sort of visual, what do you think when I say dominatrix?
Well, I mean, the image that comes to mind, I assume, for a lot of people would be a woman dressed in tight latex and, with a whip or something. That's a really standard, bog standard stereotype of it, isn't it?
Absolutely. And when you think
Yeah.
submissive, what do you think?
Well, I mean, interestingly for me, what comes up is maybe a guy on a lead, maybe pretending to be, a pet or
Yes.
something.
Yes,
It's like, again, a stereotype. Yeah.
absolutely. So, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question properly, but to
Go with
me,
it.
everything is very gendered.
Hmm.
You look at like if classically, and I'm going to use a little bit of an outdated term that is still used, but it really describes a very specific set of people I know. So
Hmm.
cross dressing,
Yeah.
dressing as the quote opposite gender for sexual gratification, emotional gratification in some cases. Quite often, it's so that you feel sexy, right? And stereotypically, that is a grown man wearing like lingerie and tight dresses, essentially being dressed up as the colloquial whore is a lot of times what I've been asked for. And that very much is like playing with like, and it's very rare that I ever really had anyone who was necessarily AFAB, femme, etc., wanting me to dress them up as a man.
Yeah.
And then you have the classic dom look is exactly what you said, full black latex, or alternatively, you get the school marm, so pencil skirt, black top. Generally, very tall woman with black hair is the image that comes to mind. Sometimes she is blonde, but most of the time, it is she when you think dom. For me, I have not been out to sort of public, how would I say this? Other than for work, I haven't been to a lot of like public parties, so I can't say how the general public how I have changed with the general public, because I haven't had the chance to really develop my non-binary public persona. I don't know how the public is going to respond to me, and I other than just people who listen to the show. And I'm not going out anymore because the world is dangerous. But gender presentation is really important to some extent in BDSM, but it's a lot of gender exploration, but it's a lot of like extremes with it. So as I've always liked to sort of fuck around, I like to go with sort of everything. So when I started getting into the scene, everyone was wearing black and a black and red, and it was this sort of red orange that I could never pull off in a million years. It's awful. It looks terrible on me. And I just didn't want to get lost in a sea of the same outfit. And so I started fucking wearing just crazy shit. I took a blue tutu and that was a shrug. And you know what? Today I'm going to be like a fucking pink doll, but I'm a dom. Don't touch me, I really like to fuck with people's sort of reality and understanding of it. Like, just because I look adorable and cute doesn't mean that you can, come up to me and start talking to me like I'm submissive. No, you still need to treat everyone with respect, but I am not submissive. There is no reason why you should take this view on a person and put it on me, because I'm not that.
Yeah. So there is a lot in the presentation and the assumptions that people make.
Yes.
And also, I guess I guess what you're saying is like it's very binary. It's very almost extremely feminized or masculinized for the sake of, I guess, the whole sexual vibe. I don't know.
I suppose. I mean, yes, to an extent, but it also takes like people who tend to be hyper masculinized in sort of work life scenarios in the vanilla world. That is what anyone who's not in kink would be called, and takes them sometimes, when consensually and willingly, and shoves them into like a hyper feminized. That's what forced feminization and feminization is. It's stripping yourself of that masculinity and being put into like a feminization state, and sort of through sometimes humiliation, sometimes sexual stimulation, mental sexual stimulation, trying to understand what the world is like from this other perspective,
Yeah, so also a role reversal almost, if you want to be binary about it, I guess, right?
Yes. So for me, I have fun with a lot of that. I like to have fun play with people who maybe have to, manage a big team. for a day,
Mm-hmm.
at work, and they want to come to me, and I'm in charge, and I'm going to tell you what to wear and everything, and none of it is your choice. Like, so you're going to wear what I tell you. You're going to do what I tell you. And so it's fun because they get to relax into something that allows them to experience the world completely differently from what they see on like a regular basis. And if that is wearing a beautiful dress, that is very, very cute on this 6'3" man, and he feels pretty for the first time in his fucking life, like actively pretty. This is an experience that he does not feel on a regular basis, generally speaking, if we look at most cisgender norms.
Yeah.
It's fairly rare that I speak to men and ask them, do you feel pretty? And they're like, huh?
Yeah.
So when I get to get somebody in a big poofy dress and I say, do you feel pretty? Often the response is a shy smile and yes. And there's no shame in it. It's like, oh,
No.
yes.
That's lovely, really, isn't it?
Yes. I have more sweet moments as a pro-dom than I do, let's say, as a cam performer. Like sweet self-understanding, self-actualizing moments.
That's really lovely. Oh. Yeah. Have you had clients that are non-binary or otherwise gender non-conforming? And are there trends or things you've noticed that stand out? And what has that taught you about gender roles?
I haven't had any clients that would identify that way. Most of my clientele, at least from, when they met me and how they decided to present themselves to me, were men.
Okay.
So, but I have played with plenty of people in my 13 plus years in the BDSM scene. If you're asking me do you see what non-binary people like the most? I think that it's not necessarily, it tends not to be the forced dressing up, because I think that perhaps we all enjoy playing with clothes so much that, there is no forcing. It just isn't it's not an option. It just isn't something we would suggest playing with each other. Just it would just be let's get dressed and then do something else. But in terms of going out into two spaces and seeing what presentations I see at different playstations in parties, I would say, from my experience again, that a lot of there is a trend towards shibari is really popular right now. And I think part of that is because you can, it's not like a high pain thing. You can do it really simply. There are classes. So the accessibility for it is a lot. Accessibility, but also public acceptance of it is a lot higher. And it's not heavy in most cases. It's not immediately oops, as long as you're doing things safely. I mean, yes, it can go bad really, really fast. Obviously, please don't come at me, hugging bondage people. It can, and everyone who wants to try bondage should absolutely take a class. Do not fucking play with ropes on your own. Always have a set of fucking scissors.
Safety first.
That can cut through your ropes, everything. But if I'm gonna play something brand new with my new partner, I'm going to tend to lean towards shibari and spanking as my intro versus water sports and caning.
That's fair.
Water sports being I pee in your mouth, on you, something, or caning is I'm gonna whack you with this really thin rod really hard. So I think I only perhaps I'm seeing this trend because these people are new to the scene and are, starting with the sort of 101 classes. But I'm also not a marketing person, so I haven't been watching the BDSM trends of. I can tell you what episodes of my show are really popular during the pandemic, though. Oh, and I can tell you because I've done this research that in times of pandemics, things like foot fetishes spike because the feet are furthest away from the mouth and tend to be safer to touch. So when the last big pandemic came around, when the last big pandemic came around, people it wasn't safe to be around like face stuff. So it was a lot safer to have a sex worker use further parts of their bodies. Now, a friend of mine, I'm sure they won't mind me sharing this, has done some play recently, but distanced with a pole, for some poking, because right now nothing is safe. So everyone is sort of like finding ways to play with each other safely, even just a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, that makes sense, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say is one of the most common misconceptions about sex work, besides the assumptions that, we've just talked about already, I suppose?
You're not always having sex.
Ta-da!
Ta-da!
Yeah. Mic drop.
Like even sometimes you're not even. I had one client who ended up just wanting to talk to me. Like to have somebody sit down and listen to him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what his background was. I don't know if people don't listen to him or they listen to him but with like fear. But essentially when he got there, he was like, I just would like, today's been a really hard day. I just want to talk. And sitting down with somebody for an hour to give them your undivided attention, people pay for that with therapy. But sometimes people, that's not the sort of talk you necessarily want to give. Sometimes you just want to have a conversation with somebody, and you're not going to get better undivided attention than if you're paying somebody for it. And I advocate for sex work, but I also fucking advocate for therapy. So if you have money and you need to talk, I don't know what your healthcare system's like, but ours isn't great for the free mental health stuff. So, if you can save up for it, it's worth it. And if not, save up for a save up and talk to a sex worker. I'm not joking.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've seen like, you can't surprise them.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I have a therapist and she is very, very open, works with sexual and gender minorities. And I've had chats with other people who are therapists, but many of them are very mainstream. Let's call it mainstream.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Or maybe conventional, conventional and stuff. And I'm sure I'm not criticizing their skills or expertise at all. But I think for me, it was very important for me to talk to someone who is open to things like something other than cishet monogamy.
Yes.
Because, I'm pansexual and, all that stuff. So I feel like for me, it's very reassuring to have someone who's open to that. Yes. And even though I feel like they're meant to support you and not judge you and stuff, I just feel like, I don't know. For me, it's like maybe it's an energetic thing. You tune in.
You absolutely have to shop around.
Yeah.
You absolutely have to. Not everyone fits, but it's the same thing. Like if you're looking for a therapist, it's not going to be the first one you pick most often. So yes, I absolutely agree. If you're going to go, make sure that this person shares the same views. And
I mean, the thing is, even if they don't, it's not their job to like approve of your lifestyle, call it a lifestyle. Okay, obviously in big quote marks. But at the same time, I feel like if someone were to not be in that environment, or if that were alien to them in a way, or just unconventional, do you know what I mean? I would feel like I would pick up on that and I wouldn't feel comfortable with them, or I feel like they didn't really get me,
Abso-fucking-lutely. You have to do your research before you go to a therapist, because you don't know. You want to make sure that they're not going to like send you to conversion therapy or like try those sorts of things. You want to make sure that, somebody is LGBTQ plus, IA plus, friendly.
Yeah. I'm very conscious in this conversation of how clueless I am about all this stuff. So I'm like, whenever I say something, I'm like, oh my God, am I saying the wrong thing? Probably, but there you go.
I mean, you're on a podcast journey. You're about to learn so many things from so many places. And I think that, you're going into it knowing that you're here to educate by learning, through learning, I guess is the best way to describe it. You can't be faulted for trying to learn,
Yeah.
So,
and it's definitely an uncomfortable thing, because I think in the past I would rather not say anything than say the wrong thing. Yes. And now I'm kind of more willing to say the wrong thing, but it's still bloody uncomfortable. I'm like, oh
as
my
long
God,
as you acknowledge it,
yeah.
Like, here's the thing is that the one thing that I have noticed over the last little while with exploring where my pronouns fall, because that's also something that has been a journey, and it's been very slow and shy.
Yeah.
Is that, like, it's not easy to switch your pronouns unless you are willing to try. So, say my friend previously, before discovering that they are non-binary, went by he. And then I check up with them a little while later and they say, oh, I will ask you to use they, them now. Absolutely. Do I slip up sometimes? Absolutely. Do I immediately correct myself, apologize quickly, and move on? Yes. Do I stop everything I'm doing, apologize profusely, beg them for forgiveness? No, because that is putting emotional labor on them.
Right.
It's my fuck up. Yeah. Sorry. Here's your correct pronouns. Let's move forward. We're done.
Yeah.
If totally. You didn't, if this is sort of, everything is a learning curve because we're constantly evolving as the human species, trying to just be decent human beings and respect people. And of course, we're going to have hiccups. We can't learn from our mistakes without first making those mistakes. And sure, it would be fucking great to never make a mistake, but the world would be real bland. Right. I mean, like, wouldn't we love to all live in a utopia? I don't know. Sounds a little boring, but, like, also really great. But are we there? Yeah, no, that's not an option. So let's work towards it.
Totally. Yeah. Is there anything to do with gender or your gender that you haven't said yet, but that you would like to say?
Some people like to state the fact that there are only two genders, as there are only two sexes. And, science has, well, they say it's according to science, but science has disproven that quite frequently. And the idea of a binary gender system is actually really not something that spans the whole world. There are plenty of cultures that still view more than two genders. And I don't know why. I would love to know who fucking decided that that was a thing. I mean, I can point to a couple white men, I'm sure, but it's this man from, like, 1700s. I don't know. So, some people writing on tablets or something. But there are cultures around the world that recognize more than two. And that is really sort of an important thing because it gives us a history. And I think that for a lot of people, when you realize that you're not within those binary, you feel kind of like you're suddenly this new shiny thing, like, and that you have to, like, prove yourself and your existence. And that is heavy, especially if you are also, like, queer in some way, like, not non-binary pansexual, or non-binary bisexual. I identify that way because I like the flag more. It's literally just that.
I love it.
But I think it's very important to understand that you're not alone, and like it's people were like this all along. You look at there were people there was this I did an episode on it, and of course I fucking forgot the name of the person. This person who like lived very non-binary life, and they had a wife, but they were AFAB, and they owned like a farm in like a mining town, I think. And trans people having successfully wonderful marriages throughout like history. Reading up on the history of because non-binary is, it falls outside of the binary gender assigned at birth. It thus falls under the trans umbrella. So reading up on trans history is really important, and not just the stuff that like is really important, of course, from like this century, but going back further is also really important. Because establishing history helps to establish us as valid, and will help to continue to give people rights. That's
Totally. Yeah. So you just mentioned an episode. So you have a podcast as well.
Oh, yes. I am one half of a duo / soon to be trio. I guess I'm dropping that news on your podcast. Called Fetish World Podcast. We are in our 5th season. Our tagline is all things kinky and taboo. So, sometimes we are interviewing famous kink models from around the world. Sometimes we're interviewing somebody that I just met who's brand new into BDSM, and then everyone in between. But sometimes we discuss history and, the evolution of torture devices and how they are now sex toys.
Yeah, interesting, right? Wow.
Lots of content. For now, only accessible is the last 2 seasons.
Cool. Well, I'll make sure I link to that as well.
Yes, if you want, sorry, my bad. If you want to check us out, it's www.fetishworldpodcast.com. You can find us on pretty much every podcast listening service. Soon to be on a radio station. Can't really lay those details out for you yet, but that'll be cool.
Yeah.
And if you want to find me on FetLife, I take a really long time to get back to you, but I will. It's Devi Irony.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Well, as I like to say on my show, stay kinky and stay safe.
That sounds like good advice.
Yeah.
Yay.
Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me. You can find out more details on the website at 50shadesofgender.com/Devi, which is DEVI, where you can also read the transcript. And you can find Devi on FetLife. Look for Devi-Irony. And you can find the Fetish World Podcast on fetishworldpodcast.com and on Twitter at fetishworldpod. Thank you for listening to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. You can find us online at 50shadesofgender.com and on social media. If you'd like to support us, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Plans start from only $1 a month. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender for more details. We hope you will listen again. Until then, stay curious and open-minded. I love it. Yay.
Amazing. How do I explain this? It's a deep thought, so it needs special words.
Oh, yeah. Take your time.
Oh, dear. I think I've lost my train of thought. Oh, no. Sorry, am I allowed to, I don't know how
absolutely
spicy I can get on this.
You can say whatever the fuck you want. So
okay, perfect.
Let's go there. Yeah. I love it.